As of the filming of today's video, it's Christmas, and I can't lie, I'm honestly not that crazy about this holiday. For some reason, over the last few years, I just have not been able to get into the Christmas spirit very much, so I've been spending my Christmas embarrassed by my own existence. Yay! But since today is Christmas, I thought it would be fun to do something a little festive, have a little fun with this holiday, so allow me to slip into something a little more comfortable. I'm not stripping, I'm just taking off this hoodie because I decided to wear a Christmas button-up shirt. I usually like to roll these sleeves up, they're kind of hard to roll up. And look at me go, as someone who I've never met someone more unconfident in their own body. Look at me keeping the buttons unbuttoned and showing off a little chest here. Look, it's probably going to be my last long-form video of the year, so I thought I'd have a little fun with this. Get a little festive. Though, you might not be able to see it, but I'm still wearing my pajama pants underneath this. I love giving half effort on things. Anyway, yes, welcome back to I Want to Talk About, the series where I sit on camera, I take a topic, and I blabber about it. Not in that order. I usually take the topic first and then I sit on camera and blabber about it. I've totally messed up this intro, whatever. I'm in this weird Christmas shirt and I kind of don't feel like wearing it for super long, so let's just get into the video. This is something I had been wanting to do for a while now, and obviously I'm going to do it right now. As you can tell from the title today, I want to talk about some albums that I didn't review in 2023. Every year there are albums that I miss out on and don't get to do a proper review of. It just happens that way. Between new album reviews and 10 years later, I listen to a crap ton of albums in a given year, so much so that I honestly joke sometimes that my music retention skills are kind of shot. Even if I really enjoy an album, I can forget about the entire thing as soon as I'm done, just because of how much I listen to. And naturally, there are albums I either totally miss out on when they come out, or I listen to them, don't have enough to say, and then just don't do a review of them. Happens every year, happens to the best of us. And this year, it so happened that there were albums that I just completely missed that ended up being some of my favorites of this year. And you're inevitably going to see them in my year-end best of list. So I thought I would touch down on those as well as some other albums that I didn't get to review this year, just to give you some quick and dirty opinions on them and tell you what I thought specifically, and to make it feel a little less awkward when an album shows up in my year-end list and people look at it and go, wait, you didn't do a review of it. Here's my short, quick, and dirty review. So yes, this is almost like my version of the Needle Drops YUNOREVIEW series, if you want to call it that, but it's more of a year-end thing than an occasional monthly thing, just to get through some albums that I missed. There are 17 albums I'm going to be talking about, but 2 of them are grouped together, and apologies in advance if I get through some of these really quickly. It's just that after 2 straight 40-minute long-form videos, I don't want to do a third. So with that being said, let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into the albums that I didn't get to review this year. I grew up with Shania Twain, and I do enjoy quite a bit of her old music, but as of late, I feel like she just hasn't really been doing it quite as well. And I understand that there's probably some reasons that she cannot control that are causing that, but this new album really didn't register for me at all. I feel like it was only barely better than her last album, and that's not really much of a compliment because I really didn't like her last album. I respect that she's continued to keep going, especially given everything that she's gone through, and I love her older music, like I said, but this new album, to me, it just wasn't it. One of the bigger and more beloved albums this year that I did not get to review, I know this one seems like a pretty odd one to not review. It helps that coming into this year I had no experience with Paramore as far as a full album. I knew their big hits, but I had never gotten around to a full album, so a part of me was like, can I listen to this album if I haven't listened to the other ones? But then after listening to their 2013 self-titled album for 10 years later, I thought, why not go back to this one? And yeah, I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't get to review it because it's awesome. It absolutely would have gotten an excellent if I reviewed it, and it's definitely one of my favorite albums of this year. Fantastic post-punk production, plus great Hayley Williams vocals, plus witty writing equals a massive W. I can absolutely see why this was one of the more acclaimed albums of this year. It's definitely one of my personal favorites. And now between listening to this and also the self-titled album, I really gotta go back through the entirety of Paramore's discography at this point. Sometimes I do listen to artists that make people question, is this person still making new music? And Macklemore is one of those artists. When this album came out and I listened to it, I had a couple people around me that were like, wait, Macklemore still makes music? And yes, he does. And unfortunately, this record is pretty uninteresting. We kind of know what Macklemore does at this point. He's the motivational poster rapper, but the only difference now is that with this album, he goes down some pop routes that I think he really shouldn't have. It's not a great album, though it wasn't really one that made me that angry or upset. It just kind of made me shrug my shoulders, go, alright, that wasn't very good, and then move on to the next thing. No disrespect to Macklemore, but it feels like since that big album that he put out in 2012 with Ryan Lewis, his music since then has just not been nearly as interesting. This was perhaps the most acclaimed hip-hop album of this year, and it was one that I missed out on when it came out because I don't really listen to JPEGMAFIA or Danny Brown. I haven't really heard either of their solo discographies. So again, even though that sounded like a pretty fantastic meeting of the minds, it sounded like one that I was just gonna leave to the fans and kind of go off and do other things. But over time I decided, you know what, why not give it a shot? So I listened to the album and the DLC pack that got released a couple months later, the EP with a couple new songs, and yeah, it's a pretty fantastic album. I think JPEG and Danny are a perfect combination, and I love the record's creative audacity. You certainly won't hear much out there in the hip-hop world that sounds quite like this. And especially in a year that I felt was pretty slow for hip-hop, this was a huge highlight. Very unique, very different, very over the top, but in a great way. I'm kind of upset with myself that it took so long to get around to it, but I'm glad I eventually did. It's a great album. I don't know if it's necessarily going to make me go back through either of their solo discographies necessarily, but I'm definitely glad I heard this collaboration come together. And if you haven't given it a chance yet, I definitely highly recommend doing so. I feel I owe an apology because I gloriously underrated this album on my first listen. When Ryan Beatty's Calico first came out, I listened to it and I kind of was just like, alright. I don't know what I was thinking at the time or what I was going through, but something about it didn't fully click with me. But recently I went back to give it another chance and oh my goodness, it's definitely one of my favorites of the year. It is an utterly beautiful and delicate project, and I've always loved Ryan Beatty's vocals, especially as a huge Brockhampton fan that's gotten to hear him more times than I can count, and his vocals on this album whisk me off my feet. I want this guy to sing me to sleep. It's a fantastic album that I definitely highly underrated the first time I listened to it. I'm glad I finally came around to it. I've been blasting White Teeth a lot over the last few days. That's a fantastic song. I definitely highly recommend you guys check out this album. Having really enjoyed the Jonas Brothers' last album, I wanted to see what this one was all about, but unfortunately, I didn't really enjoy it all that much back when it came out, nor would it ever really grow on me, because this album to me, it's kind of like Charlie Puth's album from last year, but it just sounds a tiny bit more human. Ultimately though, it's pretty bland, nothing that special at all, and some of the tracks on it are so corny. It seems like their last album was just kind of a happy surprise. This one was more just, whatever, and unfortunately not very good. Another record from an artist who I once very positively reviewed, I really enjoyed Belly's first Mumble Rap mixtape back in 2017, but I feel like most of his output since then hasn't really done as much for me. I was admittedly interested though when I heard he was making a sequel to Mumble Rap. Unfortunately, nothing that was really on here felt as immediate or memorable as any of the tracks off of that mixtape. Quite frankly, I still go back to tracks off of that mixtape, especially Lullaby. That's a huge favorite of mine. And I still think that project had a lot of great moments, but this one, not really. It's not bad, it's just not really that interesting to me. I do not often listen to or review country music. In fact, it's kind of been the butt of my joke for the last few years. And not because it can't be a beautiful genre, it's just because it so happens that a lot of the shit that tends to hit the mainstream is, well, shit. I mean, hell, this year we had a big hit country song that got to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that basically had the energy of, I'm not racist, my dog is black. But this year we did have quite a few more solid, good, enjoyable country hits, including several from this guy right here, Zach Bryan. And after listening to several songs from Zach Bryan, I Remember Everything and Something in the Orange specifically, for my yearly Billboard Hot 100 Top 10 Songs list, I wanted to listen to his latest album to see if it was anything good. And yeah, Zach Bryan makes me like country music. This album here is an incredible mix of heartbreaking writing with incredibly rustic production and some equally emotional vocals. This guy really influenced me to give country music a fair shake this year, and I'm really glad I did because this album is fantastic. And I'm really happy to see him have the success that he had this year off of this project, and the other big singles that came from it, and his other projects as well. I totally missed out on Tizo Touchdown's debut album back when it came out in September, but I kind of got the urge to listen to it because I had been hearing Tizo a bit more on some other hip-hop projects I reviewed this year. He was on Utopia and he was on For All the Dogs, and I was really interested in his style, and it made me want to check out his album, which I'm glad I did because it was awesome. Very unique. It's like R&B meets rock with a little bit of hip-hop influence as well, with a strong emotional edge here and there as well. Ultimately, it's one of the weirdest but most off-the-wall and creative albums that I've heard this year. I just kind of wish I had gotten around to it sooner, but hey, I guess better late than never, right? Either way, yeah, definitely one of my favorite albums of this year. Super unique and interesting. I definitely recommend you check it out for yourself. I really loved Offset's last album, Father of Four, but this one, unfortunately, just kind of made me shrug my shoulders and go, eh. You know it's a weird year where I enjoyed a Quavo solo album better than an Offset solo album. At least Quavo's solo album this year had a little bit more of an emotional edge to it because Quavo was talking a lot about Takeoff and his passing on that project. This record just felt like a lot of flexing, and unfortunately it just wasn't really that interesting, and at 21 tracks, it's way too long. Not terrible, but one of my personal most disappointing albums of this year, and unfortunately the most interesting thing to happen to Offset this year was Cardi B totally ripping into his ass on Instagram. Yeah. Damn. With the BTS boys currently taking a break from their group endeavors because they're working to complete their mandatory South Korean military service, it seems like some of the members have decided to take this time to drop some solo material, which means that Jungkook got to drop his debut album, Golden. Unfortunately, this record really didn't do anything for me. While Jung is a good vocalist, this record to me just sounds like everything I've heard on the radio in the last decade, or maybe even before. I mean, just looking at some of the biggest singles from it, 3D sounds to me like an old school Justin Timberlake song, and I honestly can't stop thinking every time I hear Standing Next to You, is this just the instrumental sound and style of Sade's Hang On to Your Love? It's not the worst thing ever, it's just, to me, it sounds not like the music that Jung would have wanted to make. It kind of sounds like a label project more than an artist project, unfortunately. Why in the world did it take Drake until an EP reissue thing to actually sound hungry? It's gonna sound weird, this is probably gonna be the most angry I'll ever be to kind of give something a positive review of sorts, but I have been really hard on Drake because I feel like on his last 4 albums he really has just sounded like he doesn't care. For the most part in these projects it sounds like he's bored at the wheel with his hand down his pants. There's been 4 albums of this, and now the one time that he finally decides to sound hungry is on an EP that he put out as part of a reissue of his latest album. It took until an EP? Where was this on the last 4 albums? I mean, I'm at least glad he showed that he still has some hunger, but if only he did that on an album. A full album. This is the first time in a while it sounded like Drake was something other than bored or monotone. Whatever, at least this was enjoyable. If only a proper album of his that he releases nowadays could be as enjoyable. I asked this question genuinely just because I'm not so sure, having not heard the first one. Were a lot of people asking for a Calico sequel? It seemed like some of the reception I had heard to the project was that it wasn't super great, so I wasn't sure if people were really wanting a new one or not. Either way, after listening to this album, I thought it was not bad, but just very forgettable. I didn't find myself disliking it, but it was just ultimately very average to me. Nothing about it really stood out over either of their solo material. But hey, at least Usher was on it, so that's cool. Before I get into my proper thoughts on the album, I just want to say that Andre 3000 waiting all this time to finally drop his solo album and then have it be a record of him playing the flute the whole time is so fucking based. I honestly love that. I really love that he basically went for what he wanted to do as opposed to what everyone expected him to do. Instead of just dropping a record of him spitting, he decided to drop a record of him spitting into a flute. I tried with that joke and it came out really bad, I'm sorry. But either way, I love the decision. As for the album itself, it's not really my kind of thing. I think it's a great experience. I had it on in the background while I was playing video games, and it was a beautiful experience. But as someone who doesn't really listen to ambient instrumental music all that much, I don't think it's something that I'll ever really return to. It's not something I'd throw into my playlist and be like, yeah, I gotta go back to that. It was just a cool thing to experience while it was on. I think if you are a fan of this kind of music, you'll probably enjoy it a lot more than I did. But again, the most I could say about it is that it was a great experience, and I respect that Andre did what he wanted to do with his solo album, not what everyone else expected him to do. So that's pretty dope in and of itself. Has anyone told Trippie Redd that it's okay to take a break? I mean, this was his third full-length project that he released in 2023. He started the year off with Mansion Music and then later dropped A Love Letter to U5. And then this. And hell, a lot of what's on here was basically reissued from an EP he had released a little bit beforehand. So that's kind of technically 4 projects in 1 year. I know Trippie has some passionate fans. I've seen them in my comment section several times over. But this guy has released so much music over the last 5 years, I don't know if anyone is necessarily starving for more. Especially this much more. And ultimately, this project right here was just kind of whatever. It wasn't nearly as bad as Mansion Music, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed A Love Letter to U5. I think it sounds like he's just trying to do too much at once and go through too many styles at once, and I feel like Trippie kind of needs a break at this point. Just a little bit of time to recharge, artistically speaking. And then lastly, yeah, I couldn't not talk about the new Taylor Swift re-recordings. I mean, these were 2 of the bigger albums of this year. Much like the previous albums, I didn't dedicate a proper review to these albums because they're not necessarily new. Yes, they do have new material on them, but essentially they're remasters. I didn't feel like I could do a full review, given that they're not necessarily new albums. I do enjoy them both. I mean, yeah, let's make that clear. Speak Now and 1989 are fantastic albums, and most of the review would probably just be me saying, yeah, they're fantastic albums. If you enjoyed them before, you'll enjoy them now, and the new bonus tracks are pretty good. Actually, more than pretty good, but you get what I mean. It would basically just be me saying, these albums are great, and there are some cool new tracks too. Especially on 1989. Some of the vault tracks on 1989 are pretty damn great. I really enjoyed them a lot. I will say I do understand some people were saying that some of the mixing sounded a little awkward on the 1989 re-recording, but for me, I personally wasn't that bothered by it. But yeah, I wanted to just give them a quick shout because, yeah, they were huge musical moments this year and I didn't really talk about them at all. And yes, they're re-recordings of great albums, so by proxy, they're pretty great in and of themselves. Ultimately, I think I'm curious as to what Taylor's next move is going to be, because the last 2 albums she has to re-record are going to be kind of interesting. Reputation being an album I'm still not that crazy about, and her debut being an album that I'm not anywhere near as familiar with, and because it's the oldest of the bunch, it probably could benefit the most from being re-recorded. But beyond the whole which one is going to come out first, I'm also left wondering what 2024 is going to look like for Taylor. I believe she's still touring, I'm not 100% sure. But are we going to see Taylor start dropping these last 2 re-recordings? Is she going to do what she did last year and drop another wholly new project? Is she already ready to? Or is she just going to not drop much new material this year and just focus on touring and dealing with the media reporting every time she takes a breath? Poor girl. I'm definitely interested, but until we find out then, these are great re-recordings. I've really been enjoying the Taylor's Version series. And given my lack of experience with her debut album and my not as positive experience with Reputation, I'm interested to see what's going to happen when those re-recordings eventually come along. So yeah, that's where I think I'll leave it off. Those are some albums that I listened to this year that I didn't do proper reviews of. What did you guys think about these albums, whichever ones you listened to? What are some other noteworthy albums that you enjoyed or listened to in 2023 that I didn't talk about? Whatever your thoughts and opinions are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And yeah, this is probably going to be my last long form video of 2023. I do have another video that I want to do. I want to jump back to gaming to talk about my most anticipated games of 2024, but I think I want to take the last few days of 2023 just to take a break, recharge a little bit. So I think this will be my last long form video of 2023. And with that in mind, I always get a little sappy at the end of the last long form video, and I like to give a little sum up, I guess, but I feel like it always deserves to be said. Thank you to all of you guys who are watching this video, and thank you to all of you who have supported me in any way in 2023, because this was a wildly up and down year for me personally. Some really great moments that I'll look back on very fondly, but there were a lot of rough times too. I alluded to this in my 10 years later video, but coming into the year, I thought I was going to have a lot of things figured out, and I thought that my mental health was going to be more in order than it was, but things went awry, and now I'm back to working things out a little bit. But I'm getting through as best as I can, and I know as far as long form videos, even though I feel like I finally figured out the direction that I wanted to take the channel in with this series I want to talk about. I do know there were a couple points where there were long video droughts, and I'm sorry about that. Again, life is hectic. YouTube is not something I can do full-time. I don't get paid for it, so I can only do it with the time that I have. But I still enjoy doing these videos, and even though I don't have the biggest subscriber base, I'm just glad I have anyone that watches these videos at all. A lot of times when I see that I got a comment from someone who's been here since 2019 or something, it makes me happy. I'm glad that you're still here after all this time. Even despite all the changes to the channel and the structure, I'm glad that I still have people who enjoy what I make and check out what I make and all that good stuff. Even if it's just 20 to 30 views, I'm like, that's cool that anyone saw it. And I'm glad I get to do this, and I'm glad I got to figure out the direction I wanted to take these videos in. Hopefully 2024 I'll be able to have more content that I'm able to put out, a little less creative block. Obviously, we'll see how it goes, but again, thank you guys for watching this video and all the videos that I've been putting out this year. Merry Christmas and or Happy Holidays. I know by the time this video is up, it won't be Christmas anymore. To those of you who celebrate Christmas, I hope you had a great Christmas. If you celebrated or are celebrating another holiday, I hope it's great. If you're not celebrating a holiday, I hope you had a nice day regardless. Happy New Year, of course. Hopefully 2024 is a better year for all of us, because I know that 2023 was rough on a lot of us. And hopefully life takes it a little bit easier, because Lord knows it needs to. So yeah, until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for all the support and love, and all of you who checked out any of my videos in 2023. And I will see you guys in 2024. Peace.